Okay, as I was saying, about statistics in your speech, there is a book called How to Lie with Statistics, or How to Make Statistics Lie, or something like that. And again, that makes numbers cited out of context to be very ineffective as your evidence. And by the way, there's something called soft evidence and there's hard evidence. Primary sources and secondary sources. I'm not sure if we've gone over them yet, but like a primary source would be, oh, I'm going to ask Miss Sally about Egypt because she's been there and she's Egyptian. But a secondary source would be, I'm going to read an article that someone wrote about Miss Sally's experiences in Egypt. So you're not asking the person themselves, you're asking someone else. Or you don't have to even be asking, you can just read about it, like the article that I just hinted at. Rounding numbers, instead of saying $2,462.91, in very few cases is it going to be better for you to say every single number to that whole decimal place. You may forget the number, you may miscite it, and people can't really imagine it that well. It's easier just to say $2,500. Sometimes for effect you could be like 3,200, 9,400 billion, million, whatever it is. Yes, that's the number of dollars that each of us is going to owe when the deficit goes whatever. So sometimes to make an effect, for dramatic effect or theatrical effect, you could do that, but most of the time you're not going to want to say all the confusing numbers and decimal and all that. Using the consumer price index can paint a clearer picture for your audience. That's very true. You want to put it into some form of perspective, and your book gives the example of salaries, presidential salaries, and they said even though Bush had the biggest number salary, meaning he had like $200,000, whereas Lincoln had like $50,000. If you do the consumer price index and do the inflation thing, then it shows that he actually made, like if you evened it out, it's like 90,000 versus Lincoln made like 200 million. I don't know. So you're putting it on an even playing field. If you know about math, which I certainly don't, but instead of doing 1/2 plus 1/4, you would make it all over 2 or all over 4, just so you can like multiply it and all that. And you should tell us where you got those statistics, and that's obviously correct. Okay, next question regarding testimonies, which is not true. I think even though about half of you got this one correct, half of you seemed kind of confused about it. So let's go over this one. You must never reveal a source's name if you promise them anonymity, and your citation would read anonymous or confidential interview. Now that is true, because if I told you something off the record, maybe you're talking to someone who has committed a crime, or maybe let's say an Egyptian girl had a boyfriend, and if her parents find out, then they can like kill her or deport her or something like that. Then obviously it would not be in your best interest, neither the interviewee's best interest, for that to come out of the closet. Also, quoting out of context can be similar to lying with statistics, and that's correct because when you quote out of context, it's kind of like, what if I told you, oh, I was talking to the governor of Texas, and he said, or she's, I don't know if it's a he or she, killing people is always right. Now let's say, and then you're like, and let's say those words did come out of their mouth, but backtrack a little and say, okay, what if they said, I don't know about you, but I disagree with the fact that killing people is always right. So see how you took it out of context and it made it look like she or he was supporting whatever I just said and not against it. So when you lie with statistics, it's very similar to doing that. Finally, you must always cite any testimony you use, whether quoted or paraphrased. And that means you can't just up and be like, oh, well, it's really important for you to use the theory of relativity because blah, blah, blah. You're like, okay, well, Einstein or whoever it was came up with the theory of relativity. It's not that anyone thinks you're claiming it for yourself. Oh, I made up the theory of relativity, which came out 50 years before I was born. But it's just, it makes you look as though you're trying. I mean, it could come across like, okay, I know this one guy that teaches, or he used to teach with me, and he would always take things from textbooks and he would use them, but he would never use citations. He would never say, okay, the person who came up with this research is X, or the person who first came up with this chart is Y. And then people thought that he was the one who made it up, and that he was like the author of these things. And then when they wrote about it and other people read it, they said, don't you know that this was written 50 years before this teacher was born, blah, blah. So, I mean, it kind of looks like you're lying, even if that's not your intent. And also it builds your competence and credibility to know who is the major researcher in that field or whatever it is. Okay, now we have, so the actual answer, which was false, like you're choosing the not true one, was expert testimony is more valuable than peer testimony. Now that's because you might say, oh, well, an expert has a degree in the thing, they've studied it, blah, blah. But let me tell you this. How many of you, let's say you females out there, like you ladies, you went to, let's say you had children or something. Now, you might have a male doctor who has a PhD in obstetrics and gynecology, and he knows all about the uterus and fallopian, whatever it is, but has he ever had a cramp, or has he ever carried a child in his stomach, or his, like, or whatever? No. So he could have all that academic knowledge, but that does not make him any more qualified to tell you about, I mean, he could explain the functions, but he can't tell you how it feels. He could describe what he's heard it feels like, but again, her testimony, the lady's testimony who's gone through these things, which is considered peer testimony in your book, is not any better or more credible. They're basically equal. Not equal as in exactly the same, but they each have their place, basically. Another example could be, for example, someone who has several degrees in, like, religion, and they could know everything, and they could even be an ordained minister or like a missionary or something, but that doesn't mean that they believe those things. It's kind of, for those of you who go to church, you'll know what I mean, knowing about God versus knowing him and having a relationship with him and his son who rocks. But anyway, next we have our good friend number 17. Which of the following is true? And because I spent 7 hours on the last question, I'll just read you the good answer, which is most speeches have 2 to 5 main points, and that's the true one. And the false ones are all the other ones. On the Home Shopping Network, HSN, they always say stuff like, okay, and up next hour we have the Black and Hour, whatever, Hour of Power, Black and Decker. We'll start out with table saws, circular saws, and we'll go to sapphire bracelets. Did I write that? Oh, spectacular savings. That would be an example of, that's a preview, because at the beginning you're saying, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. Whereas a summary would be, this is what we, oh, so as we've seen, the table saw and the circular saw and the sapphire bracelet are excellent values, and we hope you've enjoyed the hour. So that's your conclusion with a summary in it. Transition and connective, they're sort of similar, so I'm sure you know what that is, so I'm not going to go over it. Your book uses Carla's use of the word all right as an example. Which concept is that most closely related to from the video lecture? Most of you got that one correct. I was very happy to note. And what that refers to is this girl, Carla, in the book, apparently she kept saying, all right, now we're going to look at surfing. And it's very good. All right, now. So every time she went to make a connective or like use a transition, the word all right came out. And that was just like our good friend, the rhythmic from the video lecture, which I'm sure you memorized because it was so daffy. Yes. And finally, which of the following is not true about signposts? And the correct answer for that is they should not be used in conjunction with internal summaries or internal previews. And that's incorrect because it doesn't, I mean, you can use all of them, you can use some of them, or none of them. Well, you should use them at some point. But the other ones often include numbers. That's not true because a signpost often is, first we'll look at blah, blah. Now we'll look at this. Next, blah, blah. They were mentioned in the video lecture, definitely, and they tell you where the speaker is in the speech, which is where the whole number thing comes in to play. Anyway, well, that is the last question, and I'm sure you're breathing a sigh of relief if you even watched this. I can't believe I've gone for 30 minutes talking about this test, but, well, believe it. Anyway, if you have any other questions, feel free to email them to me. If you have any topics that you want covered in the next video note, that's fine. Also, the video lecture, this time around, we're going to have the delivery part, so I know that at some point this week I'm going to come up with an interesting video lecture for y'all. And the chapter folder is up, the one that says due 18th October, and your next folder is not up yet, and that's only because the exam window's in there, and that's the only thing that's going to be there, and I didn't want to confuse anyone, because I'm prone to confusion myself, so. Anyway, hope everyone's well, and take care, and I guess I will see you all later. Same bat time, same bat channel. Yeah. Bye.